My name is Tom Wilson, and every word of this story is true, even if people don't believe it. If you want an explanation like that, perhaps my wife Carla and I just imagine everything that happened to us on August 16th, 1983. I'll let you, the reader, decide. When I got engaged to Carla, we knew we wouldn't have much money when we got married. I used to paint back then, and Carla wrote. Living in a city was expensive, so we started looking for a country cottage. We wanted something pretty, but with an indoor toilet to live in after we were married. We searched in newspaper ads for a while, but all the cottages we visited with indoor toilets looked awful, and all the pretty ones had no toilets inside. We still didn't have a home on our wedding day, but during our honeymoon, we found a perfect place. We found a decent cottage with a bathroom, about 2 miles away from the village. We decided to rent it right away as it was awfully cheap. We spent the rest of our honeymoon buying old furniture from shops in the nearby market and new bedsheets and curtains from a big shop in London. Soon, the place began to feel like home. It was easy to work there. I never got tired of painting the wonderful sky. Carla sat at the table and wrote about everything, including me. We found a small old woman from the village to cook and clean for us. She was tidy, great at cooking, and knew everything about gardens. She also told us the old names of the places nearby, stories about robbers who used to live there, and about ghosts who sometimes appeared in front of people late at night. She was the perfect servant for us. Carla hated cooking and cleaning, and I loved listening to old stories. So we let Mrs. Thomas take care of the cottage. We used her old stories in our writings and pictures and sent them to magazines, which helped us earn some money. We had 5 months of happy marriage and never argued. Then one evening in August, I went to visit our only neighbor, Dr. Terry, a friendly Irishman, for a chat and to smoke my pipe. I left Carla smiling and writing a funny story about village life for a magazine. But when I came back, I found her sitting on the window seat, crying.
"What's the matter?"
I asked.
"Oh, Tom, it's Mrs. Thomas. She says she has to leave before the end of the month to take care of her sick niece. But I don't believe her because her niece is always sick. I think someone has turned her against us. She seemed so strange when she spoke to me."
"Don't worry, my dear,"
I said.
"But don't you see? If she leaves, none of the other villagers will want to come here. I'll have to cook and wash dishes, and you'll have to clean knives and spoons. We won't have time for writing or painting."
"I'll talk to Mrs. Thomas when she comes back. Maybe she wants more money. It'll be all right. Let's go to the church,"
I said, trying to calm her down. The church was large and beautiful, and we liked going there on nights with a full moon. The churchyard had many dark trees. The church door was heavy wood, and its windows were made of colored glass. Inside, there were dark wooden seats and at the end, two grey marble figures of old knights lay on their tombs, one on each side. Strangely, you could always see them, even if the rest of the church was dark. Their names were forgotten, but villagers said they had been fierce and terrible men. One night, during a huge storm, lightning struck their large old house and destroyed it. Interestingly, this was the same place where our cottage now stood. However, their son's wealth allowed them to be buried in the church. Looking at their proud marble faces made it easy to believe the story was true. Carla and I sat together without speaking, looking at the wonderful stone walls. As we left, we felt that even if we had to do cooking and cleaning dishes ourselves, it wasn't so bad after all. When we got home, Mrs. Thomas had returned from the village. I asked her to come into my painting room for a short talk.
Mrs. Thomas, are you not happy here with us?
I said when we were alone.
Oh, no, sir. You and your dear wife have always been very kind to me.
Aren't we paying you enough?
I asked.
No, sir, I'm paid quite enough.
Then why don't you want to stay with us?
My niece is sick. I must leave before the end of the month.
But your niece has been ill since we arrived.
There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I broke it by asking,
Can't you stay for another week?
No, sir, I must leave by Monday, but perhaps I can come back to you next week.
I was now certain that all she wanted was a short holiday.
But why do you have to leave this week?
I asked. She looked nervous and continued slowly.
They say, sir, that this was a big house in the past, and many strange, dark things happened here. The owners, when they were young men, enjoyed attacking, robbing, and killing both men and women. They were dangerous men, sir, and no one stood up against them. So, as time passed, they became even more evil. Eventually, their terrible crimes, along with the deaths of many innocent children from nearby villages, brought lightning down from the sky to destroy them.
I was glad that Carla wasn't in the room with us. She was always nervous, and I thought that these old stories might make our house less dear to her.
Please tell me more, Mrs. Thomas. I'm not like many young people these days who laugh at strange things like that.
This was true in a way. I loved her stories, although I didn't really believe them. She began in a low voice.
Well, sir, perhaps you've seen the two figures in the church.
You mean the knights?
I mean those two life-sized marble figures. They say that on Halloween, those two figures sit up and leave their tombs. And as the church clock strikes 12, they walk out of the church door, over the graves, and along the path.
And where do they go?
I asked with interest.
They come back here to their house, sir, and if anyone meets them,
Well, what happens?
I asked eagerly, but I couldn't get another word from her. She just warned me.
lock the house early on Halloween, sir, and make the sign of the cross over the door and windows.
But who was here last Halloween?
No one, sir. The lady who owned the house only stayed in the summer and always went to London a week before Halloween. I'm sorry to bring trouble to you and your lady, but my niece is ill and I must go on Monday.
She had made up her mind to leave, and nothing we said could change it. I decided not to tell Carla about the story of the figures that walked in their marble. I didn't want to upset her. This story felt different from Mrs. Thomas's other stories, and I didn't want to talk about it until Halloween had passed. Throughout that week, I was painting a picture of Carla by the window. While I worked on it, I couldn't stop thinking about the story of the two nights. On Monday, Mrs. Thomas left, telling Carla before she left.
Try not to go out too much, madam. If there's anything I can do for you next week, I'll be happy to help.
I understood that she wanted to return after Halloween, although she kept mentioning her sick niece until the end. Monday went well. Carla prepared a delicious dinner, and I washed the knives, spoons, and plates afterward. Then Tuesday came, and it's what happened on that day that this story is truly about. Everything that happened on that day is burned into my memory, and I'll tell the story as clearly as I can. I got up early that day. My wife and I enjoyed making breakfast together and washing the plates and forks afterward. We cleaned all morning and had lamb roast and coffee for lunch. Carla seemed even sweeter than usual, and our walk that afternoon was the happiest time of my life. After watching the sunset, we returned to the house, silently, hand in hand.
You're sad, my dear.
I said as we sat down together in our little sitting room.
Yes, I am. Or maybe just uneasy. I don't think I'm feeling well. I've shivered 2 or 3 times since we came in, and it isn't cold in here, is it?
You haven't caught a cold from the mist, have you?
I asked her worriedly.
I don't think so. Tom, do you ever feel like something bad is going to happen?
No, I don't believe in such things.
But I do. The night my father died, I felt it, even though he was far away in the south of Scotland.
We sat watching the fire in silence for a while.
Don't worry about me. I feel better now. What a baby I am. Let's play some music together,
she said. So we spent a happy hour or 2 at the piano. Around 11:30, I felt the need for my pipe. Carla looked so pale that I thought it would be terrible to smoke inside. So I said,
I'll take my pipe outside.
I'll come too.
Not tonight, my dear. Go to bed. You look really tired.
I kissed her and was about to leave when she wrapped her arms around my neck and said,
I never want to let you go. Don't stay out too long.
I won't.
I walked slowly out of the front door, leaving it unlocked. What a night it was. The sky was filled with dark clouds and stars. Everything was quiet. I could see the church tower across the fields, standing dark against the sky. I heard the church bell chiming. It was already 12 o'clock. I turned to go back into the cottage, but something kept me outside. I couldn't bring myself to go back into our warm rooms just yet. Instead, I decided to walk over to the church. In a strange way, I felt like I should offer my thanks there for my faithful, loving wife. As I walked, I imagined our long and happy life together. As I walked slowly along the woods, I heard footsteps that matched my own.
It's probably a villager gathering fallen branches for their fire or trying to catch a forest animal, but they should learn to step more lightly.
I thought. I turned into the woods, and now the footsteps seemed to be coming from the path behind me.
It must be an echo.
I thought. Soon I was crossing the churchyard. I stopped for a moment at the bench where Carla and I had watched the sunset. Then I noticed that the church door was open. I felt guilty for not closing it properly during our last visit, as we were usually the only ones who came there, except on Sundays. Then suddenly, I remembered that this was the day and time when the villagers believed the shapes in man-sized marble began to walk. I knew I had to go into the church. My plan was to tell Mrs. Thomas that I had seen the knights there at 12 o'clock on Halloween, and that her story was just a crazy story, nothing more. When I entered, everything was dark. As I walked towards the end of the church, it seemed larger than before. Then the moon came out and showed me the reason why. The man-sized marble bodies were gone. Was I going crazy? I stepped forward and reached out to touch the flat tops of the tombs. Had someone stolen them? I started shivering. I knew something evil was about to happen. I ran from the church. I hurried across the fields toward the light coming from our cottage window. Suddenly, a dark figure came out of the darkness in front of me. I ran toward it crazily, shouting,
"Get out of my way!"
But a hand grabbed my arm and held it strongly. It was our neighbor, the Irish doctor. He said,
"Hey there."
Let me go. You don't understand. The marble figures are gone from the church.
I shouted. He laughed loudly and said,
"You've been listening to too many old village stories.
I've seen the empty tombs, I'm telling you.
Look, come with me. I'm going over to old Howard's. His daughter's ill. We can stop at the church on the way, and you can show me what you think you saw."
he said.
All right.
I said. He still held my arm as we entered the church and walked to the end of it. I kept my eyes closed. I was certain the figures wouldn't be there. Dr. Terry lit a match and said,
"Here they are, as large as life."
I opened my eyes, and in the light of Terry's match, I saw the two figures lying in their marble on the tombs.
Thank you. Perhaps it was the light, or perhaps I've been working too hard. I can't explain it. I was certain they were gone.
I said,
"I know. Just don't think about scary things too much."
he said. He was looking closely at the figure on the left, whose stony face was the most evil and deadly.
Look at that. The hand on this one is broken.
He said, pointing. He was right, but I was certain that the last time Carla and I had been there, it had been perfect.
Maybe someone was trying to steal them,
he said.
That still doesn't explain what I thought I saw.
Perhaps you saw strange things because you paint too much and smoke your old pipe too often.
He laughed.
Let's go. My wife will be worried. Come and have a glass of beer with me. We'll forget about ghosts,
I said, feeling a bit better.
Okay. It's late. I'll visit old Howard's in the morning,
he replied. Maybe he thought that I needed his help more than Howard's daughter did. So we walked back to our cottage. As we got closer, I saw the light coming from the front door. The sitting room door was also open. Had Carla gone out?
Come in, Dr. Terry,
I said, and Dr. Terry followed me into the sitting room. It was brightly lit with candles placed all over. Light, I remembered, was Carla's way of dealing with nervousness. Poor girl, I thought. I've been so foolish to leave her alone. But where was she? Then I turned to the open window and saw her. Had she gone there to watch for me? What had caused her face to fill with horror? My poor wife. She had fallen back across the table by the window. Her head was thrown back. Her long, untied hair was touching the carpet. Her eyes were wide open in fear. They saw nothing now. What had they seen last? The doctor moved towards her, but I pushed him aside and ran to her, crying.
It's all right, Carla. You're safe now.
Her body fell against mine. I held her, kissed her, and called her name again and again, but deep down, I think I already knew that she was dead. Both her hands were closed. In one of them, she held something very strongly. When I was certain she was dead and that nothing mattered anymore, I let Dr. Terry open her hand to see what it held. It was a gray marble finger